start the session, and I will say you're live down in the chat box. So, are you ready, Monica?
Yeah.
I'm going to turn my camera off and then watch for my note in chat, okay?
Good evening, everyone. And thank you for joining us this evening for this very insightful panel conversation where we'll be discussing how to bring value back to source countries. And here, to be clear, source countries are the countries that are producing gemstones mainly. Just to set a background to this panel conversation today, Africa is known to have plenty of mineral resources. It is actually said that Africa has 30% of mineral resources globally. These are, of course, a variety of resources ranging from platinum, gold, bauxite, among others. Further to this, Africa is known to be a source country of a lot of gemstones, and that the rough gemstones that come from Africa really fuel trade in the global supply chain of gemstones. The rough gemstone industry is said to be valued at an estimate of around $17 billion. And in the African context, most of these gemstones, 80% of these gemstones are actually mined by artisan and small-scale miners. Despite these staggering statistics and the quantities we are discussing, a lot of this value does not come back to source countries. Africa doesn't have much to show for the amount of minerals that have been extracted over time in this continent. And the artisan miners who mine these gemstones remain in abject poverty. What is the issue? Why do people who mine precious metals like gold, precious commodities like sapphires and rubies still remain in abject poverty? How is this sector organized? What are the issues? This is what this panel is going to explore today. And we want to see how is the informality of some of the miners, the artisan miners, how is it breeding and resulting to illegalities? And how are these illegalities being exploited to bring about criminality in the supply chain? I really hope that in evaluating these issues, we will not dwell overly on the problems and the challenges, but through the very skilled panelists that will be joining me in this conversation today, that we will move also from agonizing only about the issues and organizing towards the solution as well. Joining me today in this panel conversation to guide us through this conversation, I have three able panelists. I really hope my third panelist will get on. But the first panelist, and I'm going to introduce them, is Masena Hunter. Masena is a senior analyst at the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. Her work has covered a wide range of illicit crime types, flows, and geographic spread. She currently focuses on gold-related illicit flows, political economy analysis, and development responses to crime. She's a casual research fellow at the University of Queensland, where she also lives currently. Next in the panel is my comrade and a friend of mine, Chico Manda. Chico is a gemstone miner, a passionate advocate for ASM issues in the continent. Chico lives in Malawi. He's also one of our coordinators for the Virtue Gem Initiative in the northern part of Malawi region and works as a consultant on ASM issues. We will be joined later by another friend of mine, comrade Mukasiri Sibanda, who, along with Chico, we work closely with on artisanal mining issues, an accountant turned researcher and blogger on issues of mineral governance in Africa. Recently joined the Tax Justice Network Africa as an advisor on tax and natural resources. And he's well known for the work you did previously in Zela for 9 years, steering issues on development and artisanal mining activities. So that is the panel joining us today to discuss the issues of bringing value back to source countries. To start us off, I want to give this opportunity to Masena. Masena, you did a research in collaboration with Dr. Linda Lawson, looking at the supply chain and the issues and the dynamics of this illegality that maybe is breeding criminality in the value chain and the flow of gemstones from Africa to Asian countries. I want you to kindly point out to the participants joining us today the salient issues of your research project without bogging us on too much technicalities, to really give us a dashboard view of what is happening in the sector, where are the issues, what were the recommendations of your report, and really just set the stage for this conversation. Masena, you're welcome.
Thank you, Monica, for moderating this panel, and thank you to the conference for inviting us to participate. I did co-author a report called A Rough Cut Trade with Dr. Linda Lawson from the University of Queensland. And I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with the Global Initiative, but the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime is a Swiss-based civil society organization that has a global secretariat and an associated network of over 400 experts. And it provides a platform to provide greater debate and innovative approaches on the building blocks necessary for an inclusive global strategy on these issues. So that's a bit about us. As for this study, it is, I should say it's limited in scope. It was a first study, and it focuses on rough gemstone flows from Africa to Thailand, focusing specifically on the role of African traders within this supply chain, because they've really been an underrepresented and under-recognized group in these supply chains, despite their real importance in connecting mining communities to the market, which is hugely important. And so some key findings of the report, and which I think I should emphasize, is that I liked the description of the session a lot because it talked about systems and not necessarily actors. And I think it's important to understand the different terminologies when we're describing this activity, because there's a lot of debate around criminal, illegal, informal, and how we describe these actors. And I think it's important in the case of African traders to understand that maybe they're more informal or act illegally in some contexts, but they're not criminal actors. They're not seeking to act criminally usually. It's more a product of the systems and networks involved which force this type of behavior. And not only does it force this type of behavior, but as you alluded to, it really creates huge opportunities for those criminal actors to exploit and financially benefit from the sector. And as we saw very recently, this can have really severe implications. The US just sanctioned an Australian gemstone dealer for engaging in money laundering and terrorist financing through the colored gemstone sector. And so we can see that this has real implications. And then as far as bringing the benefits back to the country, there really is not a clear idea of the value of gemstones that are flowing from Africa to Thailand. And we did make an effort to value these chains, but I think the fact is that nobody really knows, and there hasn't been, I think, good methodologies, or if it's even possible to measure this. And so when we're talking about how much African countries are losing, it's a lot, but nobody really knows how much because of the informality of the sector. And that not only results in African countries losing taxes and that sort of thing, but it also is detrimental in that it doesn't recognize the importance of the sector and its value. And also African countries aren't getting recognition for their stones, because often what we see with these supply chains is that the provenance of the stones is either misrepresented or changed throughout the supply chain to be said to come from a different country, which maybe has a higher value provenance, which is something unique to the colored gemstone sector, I think. And so when we're talking about bringing the value back to African countries, these are kind of the issues that came up in our research. But I guess I just want to emphasize that the African traders we're talking about themselves, I would not classify them as criminals. I would look at the systems they're interacting with and look at how those systems encourage or enable informality and illegality, and the actions of more nefarious or criminal actors who are actively acting to exploit and engage in criminal profits, money laundering, and that sort of thing.
Thanks, Masena. I like what you say. We're looking at the systems and asking ourselves, is this a systemic issue? I also like the issue of what you're saying, that the players are not criminals. The stakeholders are not criminals. It's the informality of the sector that may be facilitating or leading to illegality, which then results into criminality, as I had stated, right? We have worked on artisanal space for a while. The initiatives we are doing around this. And to carry on this conversation, I want to invite Chico to really bring home this conversation about what is happening in an African country where he's based in Malawi. He works with the gemstone players in Malawi. Chico, we've had this conversation before. I'm based in Kenya. I have seen how gemstones, get exported. I have seen how porous the borders are. And as Masena has said, they're not criminals. Artisanal miners are always about survival. It's always about making a livelihood, Chico, I want you to paint a picture using Malawi as a case study about how some of the gemstones are sold, your rhodolites that are smuggled across borders in most instances, the fact that they lose provenance and cannot be traced back to Malawi, the lost opportunity for your country, for the miners in terms of revenues and taxes. Chico, you're welcome.
Thank you, Monica. Yeah, indeed, I would like to agree with Masena that these artisanal miners are not criminals, but the systems which are there are the ones which makes people to see the sector as a criminal enterprise. But it's not like that. These people, as we have already said, Monica, most of these miners, they do it because it's poverty driven. So in the situation of Malawi is that we produce a lot of gemstones here, aquamarine, rhodolite, rubies, and many more. But the thing is that as a country, we are not benefiting much from these gemstones because they are usually traded illegally. They are smuggled out because of the poor systems available. So, like for the past 6 years, Malawi has been producing a lot of rhodolites, which have overflooded the markets, but they are not usually known as Malawian because they are smuggled to our neighboring countries and they're exported there to other countries, and there's no record that it's Malawi which is producing it. So this issue is just because of the informality of the sector. We don't have proper structures to enhance legality of this business, because most of the people who are mining are in the rural areas who doesn't even know that one requires to have a license, and people just come to buy cheaply in these places and they just take it out. So it's a matter of having a very good system, developing a very good supply chain, which can benefit both the country and the miners themselves. Because currently, what is happening is that there is very minimal value addition in the country. And you tell somebody that we need to do some value addition, say we don't know anything about value addition. So these things are some of the perpetrators that makes people just to sell anyhow, and the people smuggle them outside the borders. Even some goes through the airports, the normal borders. Of course, we have got a very porous border with all our neighboring countries, but it's all because we don't have a well-developed supply chain, whereby somebody mines and it is value added in country, or a jewelry is made in country and it is exported. So that's why maybe the government is not making a lot of money, because we cannot value add most of the stones. We cannot make jewelry, so it just goes out in rough form. And mostly again, the rhodolite situation, the people who are mining rhodolite, we can say maybe 60 or 70% are women, and the 20% are the youths. So many people take advantage of these women. They just pay them little. Then, because they are also in poverty, they need to feed their families. They just sell, and they don't know how their stones end up. So it's really a good thing that we are discussing about this, because we really need to bring back the value into the source countries. And this, I think, should start from when it comes from the mine. We should enhance and promote value addition in country, so that the country can start realizing good monies from the miner himself, from the one who's value adding, and the government should correct tax from these minerals. Otherwise, currently as it stands, we are a producing country, but with no proper statistics on how much stones we are producing, on how much the country is taking in. So it's really a pathetic situation.
Thank you, Chico. You bring forth very important points in your submission. The issue of formalization of artisan miners. You also bring out the issue of lack of value addition of these gemstones. So they are still being exported rough, hence very little value coming back to the source countries. You also paint the gender dynamics in the supply chain. What's the role of women? How are they participating? You've also brought up a very critical issue on the role of the state. What are the governments doing, and what are their responsibility in setting up the right systems, to support the value chain and really ensure a lot of this value, is realized in the source countries. Thanks for your intervention, Chico. And to just bring this conversation and to continue this conversation, I want to invite Mukasiri. Mukasiri, you've not only worked with artisanal miners, you've also been an advocate a lot on the governance space on natural resources in Africa. And currently, you're focusing on illicit financial flows in the extractive sector, which is where the issue of losing value from the extractive sector comes in. So Mukasiri, what needs to be done from a governance perspective? What is the role of the state, in curbing some of these vices that we are seeing happening in the continent? I hope you're with us, Mukasiri. Hello? We might have lost him. I can see him, but we can't hear him. So I guess we'll wait for him to join back and take forth the conversation. But just to make an intervention, I was with Mukasiri earlier in a forum where we were discussing illicit financial flows in the extractive sector, in Africa. And the UNCTAD report that was released shows that the extractive sector is leading in illicit financial flows from Africa, and key pertinent issues were asked in the session, why is this happening? What is facilitating the illicit financial flows, and what is the role of state in curbing the same? And the issues of the ownership of the resources came up, who owns the resources? How are the entities and the stakeholders who are in the supply chain, how are they set up? How do we interact? And as that's what Chico was pointing out about supply chain dynamics, issues of responsible sourcing. So Masena, I want to take this conversation back to you. In your report, of course, you made recommendations, having looked at how gemstones are flowing from Africa. I think you focused on Asia in your particular report, but I must say it's not only to Asia that these gemstones go. Maybe majority of them do go to Asia, but they also do go to other countries, to Europe, to America, right? But maybe Asia has a lot of the focus because 80% maybe go there. So going back to your recommendation in the report, what were the way forward? What are you proposing as recommendations in your report to address some of these issues?
So, can you hear me? So the report has 5 primary recommendations, one of which I think is really important for this conversation. But the first is more wide-reaching and in-depth research. It kind of seems like there's a gap in knowledge on the supply chains linking mines to these processing centers, which are primarily based in Asia, and onwards to global markets. The second recommendation is increased engagement with African traders. There really is a lack of engagement in formal events and value addition activities. And these are actors who are really important, who need to be better engaged in the sector. Improve regulatory cooperation. And I think this plays a lot to the tax policies that we're talking about now. And I'll come back to this later because I think there's a more in-depth discussion there about how policies need to be appropriately tailored so that they deliver benefits without encouraging smuggling or the under declaration of exports. Of the fourth recommendation is adoptive development perspective and emphasizing the do no harm policy principle. And again, this comes back to tax policies and how do we develop tax policies that achieve what we're trying to do without further marginalizing informal actors within the sector. And the last one is support new technologies in the colored gemstone sector. So just regarding tax policies, what we see, my background is gold, so I'm bringing a lot of knowledge from the gold supply chain, the gold sector to this conversation. But what we see is that tax policies, if they're not well designed, or they are not coordinated well with neighboring countries or destination countries, is that they can actually encourage smuggling because high tax rates are an incentive to smuggling because you make more money when you don't pay taxes. And also, if you don't have formal supply chains or structures in place and haven't really supported the development of the sector and those who need it, they're not equipped to engage with these formal markets that you would then tax. So what I would say is that a first step before looking at how we tax the sector is how we support the development of it and better engage with those involved. Because if we aren't doing that first, we're A, not going to get taxes, and B, we're actually going to encourage smuggling and increase the vulnerability to criminality of the sector, pushing them further into the black market. And a last point on that is that even if you collect taxes from this, it doesn't necessarily translate into development gains because taxes aren't always spent in the ways I think we'd like them to be. And there can actually be also a divide between national government and local communities, especially when local communities feel like they're not getting the tax benefits that are collected at the national level. And so, and again, that can contribute to increased informality, criminality, exploitation, that sort of thing. And so I think taxes are one issue, but it's quite complex and there are really significant development and illegal implications when we're looking at how to best design these policies and also the sequencing of them. I think you're on mute, Monica.
Are you muted?
Okay, there.
Okay. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was agreeing with you and saying we cannot start from the point of taxation. I like the idea of starting from the point of developing the sector, and also acknowledging an involvement of the various, stakeholders in that supply chain. You say some of the dealers are forgotten, yet they play a very critical role. We have to ensure everybody is mapped out and their involvement acknowledged if you're going to develop the sector. Before we lose Mukasiri, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. I don't know about, I don't know if you can hear me too.
We can hear you excellent, but you keep going in and out. So when we still have you, okay. I wanted you to talk about governance issues, Mukasiri. You worked in governance issues in the, in the mining sector. You've looked at issues of artisanal miners as well in your work. You're now at an organization where you're looking at illicit financial flows from Africa. And I want you to talk from a point of governance. What are the issues you'd say in the gemstone supply chain that are causing these missed opportunities by source countries? What is your experience working in this space?
Thank you very much. I think to start with is the Africa Mining Vision, a blueprint that was agreed to by African heads of states and government in 2009, realizing that Africa is not getting from the exploitation of its mineral wealth. And this also applies to the gemstone industry. When it comes to geological information, knowledge of the quantity of the gemstones, this is really problematic. Citizens and even communities where these gemstones are mined, they don't even know the value that they have, the quantities, the different gemstones that are there. So that is one major problem. Like for instance, in Zimbabwe, where I come from, there are a lot of gemstones or semi-precious stones, but we don't even have a clue when it comes to and the quantity, quality, that geological data. So that's where the challenge starts for. That kind of knowledge. How rich are we when it comes to semi-precious stones? Then number two, it comes from the informal sector of the economy. And this does not only apply to the gemstone industry, but generally the whole economy, even in Africa, parts of the economy is largely informal. And the informal economy is very difficult to regulate. There's less. The mining sector is opaque, where informality is, it becomes even more in this way. There's a lot of smuggling and illicit actors, criminals that take advantage of the situation. So we have got also porous borders. The institutional frameworks again are so weak to the point that they cannot regulate the sector and make sure that the gemstone are mined and exported in a manner that can even rake in foreign currency and other tax leakages that are associated. So the challenges that we have are completely along all the value chain of the gemstone business. So I agree with what Chico has shared and Masena. So this is the challenge that we have, and also the market itself, particularly, has got a key role to play to ensure that from a trade perspective, how do we source the gemstone in a manner that can also help to redress some of the challenges which are beyond the capacities of African governments. It's not just about the country challenges. The challenges that we have are transboundary in nature, and they require international cooperation. But yes, we have got a part to play in terms of making sure that we pressure also government to address some of the low-hanging fruits in terms of governance systems. But all in all, this is what I can say now.
And I like what you say, that there's a role of the international players, the market in this. There's a regional role in terms of cooperation and integration because of the porous borders in Africa. And then there's a country role where the state is the one acting. And thank you for refocusing the conversation and reminding us about the Africa mining vision. The overarching policy document and framework by African countries, which is really supposed to focus on bringing value and benefit from their mineral resources back to these African countries. So the vision is there by the African states. They have already dreamt it and documented it through the Africa Mining Vision. And I think the issue is just the cascading and implementing this vision as envisioned at that level to ensure real benefit is actually brought back to African countries. To carry that thought forward, Chico, I want to come back to you. You mentioned something very critical about value addition. This is also a component of the Africa Mining Vision, that value can be added at source. These gemstones must not always leave Africa in their rough. They missed opportunities in that. I want you to talk more about value addition. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? And from your experience training miners, what more can be done to incentivize value addition of these gemstones in Africa?
Yeah, the main challenge with value addition is that there is lack of skills. Very few people are very good cutters. Or the other thing is that you train people, but after training them in value addition, they have no equipment to use after training. So we talk about value addition, but we are not doing enough in terms of developing the sector, maybe creating centers where people can go and do the value addition, where we have machinery, people can come use and cut. So that's one of the major challenges also. But the other thing is that most of the people need quick money. So it's, as the area said, that the sector is usually poverty driven. So for you to tell somebody that let's value add it so that you can get a better price or you can realize more money, the people say that no, I cannot wait longer. So they would rather sell a laugh to raise money fast. So we really need to do much in terms of convincing these people that value addition is a good way to make money. And it does not only let you make money, but it also creates employment, because there is somebody who's mining, someone who's doing value addition. So it's a good way to make the supply chain better. The opportunities are very great, because most of the stones which we sell laugh, we sell them cheaply. When we add value to them, we sell at a better price. And it's the miner gets good monies. The one who does the value addition gets good monies. And also it means when you're exporting, the country also get good monies because the value is higher. So it creates a win-win situation. And in terms of exporting the jobs outside the country, you retain them. You retain them in the country. So the opportunities are so enormous. And currently we are doing a certain project where I'm coordinating in the northern part of Malawi. It's a very good program because it is really promoting in-country value addition. So as Mokasiri was saying, that also the market outside there should also encourage, should also help in solving such kind of problems. The virtual gems, it's a market which is in US, but it's helping in Africa. They're saying, no, we'll buy your laugh, but what we need is that we need to do the value addition in the source country. From there, that's when they buy. Or you put your product in laugh form and the buyer sees it, he or she buys it, and it tells you that we need it to be value added there. They just give you the specification on what they need the stone to look like, what kind they want to do like. So such kind of initiatives are very good because they're not just bringing more money into the country, but they are promoting skills development, which is lacking currently. So for us to attain this value addition, we need to do a lot of trainings. Many people should be trained, should be civic educated on the benefits of value addition. But also, we need to provide equipments, create centers where people can go and do the value addition, where we have experts who can advise on pricing, on what kind of cuts you can cut. So this can really bring more value into the country than what we are currently doing. And we should not just end on maybe faceting, or lapidar or what, but we need also to go further. We need to be making jewelry in country because currently it's very pathetic. Africa produces a lot of gold, produces a lot of gemstones, but you find that the women who wear a lot of jewelries, they are putting on plastic things. They're not putting on the gemstone, on their rings or on their earrings. They are wearing maybe something made of cheap material, but when the country is producing gold, they're not wearing the gold. So we needed to change this kind of perception that these things, they're only meant for the Western world. But also as African countries, we needed to start utilizing these things. We need more women, we need men to be buying these jewelries for their loved ones. It means we are retaining more money in the country. So as source countries, we needed to do more indeed. Otherwise, we'll continue losing out. But it takes an effort of everyone. The ones who are buying outside there to promote it, the government and the SM players themselves. Because we cannot leave this thing to the government alone. The government cannot do it alone. And the miners cannot do it alone. The buyers cannot do it alone. We need to collaborate and come up with a good roadmap that works for everybody.
Thank you, Chico. Thank you for that, because in addition to just value addition, you're also talking about let's make jewelry, let's complete the supply chain. And that's a notion we've been working on with the Association of Women in Mining, where we're saying for Africa, by Africans, for Africans. It doesn't all have to be exported in order to get value. It can actually be value added. It can be mounted in Africa and actually worn by Africans. They are also a market for these stones. And maybe if we also focused on domestic markets, it would also reduce, some of these illegalities through smuggling. I also want to add something to what Chico, you're saying, that in addition to just cutting these stones, a lot of the stones that are mined in Africa are actually low grades. 80% are low grade stones that, we could do more. I always talk about tumbling for beadwork, which creates more opportunities for women to engage and make, more affordable jewelry that can be worn in Africa as well. And that's always a notion I like to carry across. Let's not just think about the high-end gem quality that always must be cut and faceted, but also the low grades where I think there'd be more value that is retained in the continent if we did a tumbling and look for other creative ways in which we can use these low grades in our own countries, to create more employment for youth and women, right? But something else you brought up, Chico, and I want Masena to join in this conversation, and Mukasiri also put this forth, the role of the markets. So there's been this new way of thinking around responsible sourcing. If I am bringing for you smuggled stones and you're not asking the questions of how they got to you, I think you're also as good as I who has broken the law, or you're facilitating me to continue to do work this way, right? So responsible sourcing comes to say, let's go as close as possible to the source. Let's be transparent in how we source. Let's establish relationships. Let's carry the story of the miner through, to the market. So, Masena, in your own opinion, what is the role of the markets and the buyers in addressing some of these challenges that you saw in the supply chain?
I think there have been some lessons learned from past efforts to get as close as possible to the source and cut out some of the middlemen in these interventions, which have not always had the most desirable impacts. And so I think when markets, and this is again why I think it's so important to engage more with African traders, and the traders who are engaging with communities is really important, is they actually can play a really valuable role in gaining access to those communities. And also, we don't necessarily want to replace supply chains and social networks, informal ones that already exist. I think what maybe hasn't been done to the extent possible is how we leverage those networks, which I think is maybe a new way of thinking about this, that could develop more sustainable outcomes in the long run. And I guess I just want to, there's a couple points. So the first is, whenever you try to cut out those middlemen of the supply chain, if we're talking about criminal networks here, you're talking about people's money. And these actors are highly motivated to protect their incomes. And so I think when you're looking at these types of interventions, we need to think about the middlemen and the illicit actors within these supply chains and what they might do to protect that income, and how that will impact on local communities, the most vulnerable. Because if these middlemen are financiers providing equipment or food or money to local communities, and they say, if you sell to this person, I'm not going to give you money, that local community is going to be less likely to engage. And just kind of thinking about what kind of motivation or power these different actors or influence these different actors have. Another point with a lot of interventions is that if they're not well designed, they actually run the risk of excluding the most vulnerable individuals, because often the types of actors on the ground who are best able to engage with capacity development or clean supply chains are not those necessarily at the lowest rung, especially your female miners. They're ones who are more powerful or influential within the local community. So maybe village elders, a wife of a governor, those sorts of actors. So then they're able to engage and move further ahead, while it leaves the most vulnerable even further marginalized and at risk of being exploited by these criminal actors. So I think when we're talking about that, it goes back to this whole notion that we really need a lot of research and a strong understanding of supply chains, social networks, and political economies in place, so that we can design these capacity building and making jewelry and country and stuff, which are great, really needed interventions. But this knowledge is necessary so that they can be designed in a way that do no harm, seek to leverage existing networks in the best way possible rather than replace them, and are done in a sustainable way. So I think that would be my input on why what Chico is saying is absolutely right. I 100% agree with it. I just think while we're trying to work towards this, these are knowledge we need and risks, unintended negative impacts that we need to be aware of when we're designing and moving forward.
Shared prosperity, that for me to prosper, I don't have to put you down. We can prosper together. We can realize benefits together. For me, that is what responsible sourcing really speaks to when you talk about sustainability, that the jeweler, the dealers, everybody in the supply chain, the miner, we can all prosper together. We don't have to put the miner down in order for everybody else in the supply chain to make their monies and their profits. Let's do it in a sustainable manner where everybody prospers, from the person who mines it to the person who wears it. You know, we see the prosperity in this in the value chain. And I think most people think when you talk about responsible sourcing, nobody is demonizing a dealer. Actually, miners love dealers because they are their first point of contact in trade. So for me, responsible sourcing is for everybody in the supply chain working ethically. You know, do your job ethically. You do not need to shortchange the miner in order to make your profits. How about we educate the miner, let them know what they're trading in, let them negotiate on the table from a point of information, get fair prices, let the dealer engage, get his own fair prices, all the way to where the stones are coming from. Shared prosperity. I'm looking through the chat session to look at if there are any questions coming from the audience who are interacting. I see more of comments than questions, hence why I've been the one doing the questions. I'm looking at the live chat interactions to see if anybody's asking us any questions. All right, so no questions so far. We have 2 minutes to wind up this session. I don't know if I have time enough to allow everybody. Actually, Mukasiri, one quick intervention. I like what you bring about the lost opportunities and value to communities when there's illicit trade. I want you to say something very small about that before we wind up.
Yeah, the greatest challenge is addressing information poverty. That is the starting point. Communities where these gemstones are mined, they do not even know what they really have, the wealth that they have. And also the part of the ethical point in terms of the supply chains is that appreciation that you are denying them the opportunity to lift them out of poverty, considering the weight of a challenge to inequalities and poor service delivery that has been illuminated further by COVID-19. I think we all owe the world to ensure that we contribute, the gemstones are mined in a manner that contribute to sustainable development of communities where they are sourced. So all I'm trying to say is this is a game where the actors must be a responsibility, that they can change the course of direction in terms of how this world is going to emerge, especially given the challenges that have been brought by the pandemic, where service delivery, like in the education sector, we are now talking about e-learning, not just about school blogs and the books and so forth. And this is the opportunity that Africa has because of its diverse gemstone wealth to lift itself out of poverty. That's my point.
Okay. Thank you. I think we are running out of time, but I see questions around what is sustainable in an African context. When we talk about sustainability in an African context, what would that look like? Interventions around value addition and cutting. What is the value of transparency in the supply chain, and what would it mean to African countries? And just to finish off, I want to just bring home the idea of collaborations and partnerships as one way of really dealing with this issue, bringing value back to source countries. That all actors and players want to have, again, shared prosperity in how this trade is done. And for me, if everybody in the supply chain benefits, if everybody in the supply chain is engaged in a manner where the business becomes, it's for the people, it benefits the people who are the actors. It does not in any way harm the environment, because we're talking about artisanal miners here who are engaging at community level. They're not harming the environment. And for profits, because everybody here is in business, from the miners to the traders to the jewelers, everybody's in business. If we can engage in a manner where there's shared prosperity, for me, that is a sustainable model. That's a sustainable supply chain for gemstones. And then, of course, the other stakeholders, like the role of governments, the role of regional integration, the role of international players, all working together, towards supporting that shared prosperity is what a model of sustainable supply chain would look like. So with those many interventions, and I'm sorry we're not able maybe to interact a lot with the audience, but the other panelists, I hope you've been reading the various comments that have come through as we've gone along with the sessions, and we can interact offline. But I wish to thank everybody for the engagement. Thank you for the time. This was a weird hour to have a session. It is well past midnight my time. It is tomorrow. I'm already on Wednesday, my side, but this was an important session. We needed to have this conversation, and engage. So I think we've just started the dialogue. More needs to be said. We've had the role of, we need more data to advise policy. So I think more needs to be done, and greater collaborations and partnerships to support this notion of bringing value back to source countries. So I thank my panelists. Thank you, Chico. Thank you, Mukasiri. Thank you, Masena. And thank you to the, to everybody who's participated in this panel. We look forward to greater engagement moving forward. Yes.
Thank you, Monica, for staying up so late to moderate this panel. It's been a really interesting discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Andrea, do we stop it or do you stop it for us?